For over a century, this studio has made tons and tons of feature-length motion pictures, and many with unique opening logo variants. And this show is going to try its best to cover every single one that it can. So come along for the ride, journeying through thousands of feature-length motion pictures from throughout over a century. Welcome to Warner Brothers Logos of the Years. Honestly, I don't even know how to start something like this. How could you possibly do a review series on several Warner Brothers movies that does justice to their over 100-year film legacy? This studio's history in film since 1923 has brought to us thousands of well-known feature-length films, across both their main division and their separate film divisions as well. Sure, some might be better than others, but they're all worth remembering.
I am Steve.
Well, most of them are. Some of them are better left forgotten.
Okay.
But the point is, even with the real undeniable stinkers, there have still been so many really well-known movies throughout Warner Brothers' over 100-year film history. This show can't possibly do justice to their amazing film legacy. That's just too huge to do justice to. So yeah, there's no way that a review show could ever fully do justice to Warner Brothers' over 100-year legacy in film. But in this show, we're going to be celebrating many of their movies with what I'm always excited to see in front of a major studio movie: opening studio logo variants. Yeah, I always love when a movie studio spices up their opening logo by adding something different, specifically unique to the movie. And Warner Brothers has certainly done that a lot. So I figured I might as well review every movie that I possibly can that has a unique Warner Brothers logo variant. We got about a century of movies to go through here, so we better get started. So, for this review show, we're going to be looking at every Warner Brothers movie with a unique opening logo variant, whether they be unique in terms of look or sound. But first, let's set some ground rules. First off, and the most obvious thing, is that we are only looking at the surviving Warner Brothers movies. And only a few feature-length films from the 1920s have actually survived. So we'll be looking at those throughout Season 1 of the show. And for each subsequent season of the show, they'll cover just 1 year of Warner Brothers movies. If there's too many Warner Brothers movies in a year to cover in just one season of the show, then that year of Warner Brothers movies will be split across a couple seasons, depending on how many movies there are in that year. And we'll also be looking at every surviving Warner Brothers movie from 1925 to now. Secondly, for this show, we'll only be covering movies with unique versions of a logo variant of either the main Warner Brothers logo or a different subsidiary of Warner Brothers, like Warner Brothers Family Entertainment or even Warner Brothers Animation. Even movies with a unique version of the Warner Brothers Home Video logo. But for short, subsidiaries of Warner Brothers with the Warner Brothers name on them. As for New Line Cinema movies, we'll only be looking at the ones with Warner Brothers logos as well. As for everything else, I'll be doing a similar series to this on New Line Cinema movies in the future. On a side note, I'll also be doing the same thing for Universal, or Paramount, or Columbia Pictures, or Disney, or pretty much any studio with tons of unique opening logo variants. And if there's a Warner Brothers movie with one of these Warner Brothers brands that doesn't have a unique opening logo variant, then you can request me to review it under what I call request episodes. Requests will only be fulfilled once we get to or past the point of the requested movie's release. You won't have to request any movies for a while because we've got a long way to go, but that will eventually become a thing in the show. Also, I want to note here that we are obviously only looking at feature-length films. The only way we'll look at short films is in an episode focused on a specific movie that it was in theaters with. And again, we're looking at any Warner Brothers movie that has a Warner Brothers logo that's different in either look or sound in any way. Which pretty much every Warner Brothers movie from the 1920s to early 1950s pretty much has. Because that's how deep I'm willing to go for this show. And for you guys. So throughout the first chunk of seasons of this show, we're going to be going through a lot of old Warner Brothers movies. And if I missed any ground rules for this show, don't worry, I'll be sure to note them in future episodes. But anyways, we're going through a century of movies for this show, so let's finally get to it. And to cover all these movies, we're going to be using a device I built to help us do that. A time machine.
A time machine?
A time machine.
Time machine.
A time... Alright, we don't have any more time to waste. Let's go. Take me back to the future. I mean, the past. The year was 1925. Warner Brothers have taken up a deal with their first big film star, a German shepherd by the name of Rin Tin Tin. 2 years prior to this point, shortly after founding Warner Brothers Pictures, Warner's put the dog in a film called Where the North Begins, which proved successful for Warner's at the time, making it over $300,000 in a single weekend. In this year, Rin Tin Tin was set to star in his next film, Clash of the Wolves. But why do we start our story here? Well, from what I know, this is actually Warner Brothers' oldest surviving feature-length film from 1925. And in 1925, Warner Brothers debuted their first ever opening studio logo for their films. And while Clash of the Wolves might not have been where it debuted, it is the oldest surviving Warner Brothers feature film from 1925, so this is where we'll be starting off. Also, another notable thing, Clash of the Wolves was actually preserved by the Library of Congress in the National Film Registry. And also for any other Warner Brothers movies that have been preserved in the National Film Registry, I'll bring it up in my review. But I thought it would just be good information to know. Now, prior to watching this movie, or any old Warner Brothers movie for this show, the only silent film that I had ever seen was 1911's Pinocchio, which I actually really enjoyed despite its age. But I'll probably talk about that film in another video. And I only bring this up to show that silent films can be good even by today's standards, just to set a standard for what we're about to go into. And after having a really good time with my first silent film I had seen, I'm actually pretty excited to go into Clash of the Wolves. Plus, it's also going to be very interesting to see how silent films were after the birth of a nation, which was an important stepping stone for feature-length films to become what they are today. But hey, at least Clash of the Wolves isn't racist. Speaking of Clash of the Wolves though, now that we're here in 1925, let's finally get to it. But real quick, right before we do, I actually want to give a shout out to the YouTube channel Remastered Cinema, who impressively remastered Clash of the Wolves in color, which you can watch on YouTube, since the movie itself is in the public domain. And I'll be bringing up the parts of the movie that look the best in this color remaster in this review. I'll leave a link to this remaster of the movie in the description of this episode, so that you guys can go check it out for yourself. But for just regularly talking about the movie in this review, I'll just be using the black and white footage, just to avoid any copyright issues. But anyways, let's see what the oldest surviving Warner Brothers movie with a unique opening logo variant is all about. So without further ado, this is Rin Tin Tin in Clash of the Wolves. Oh, of course, one more important thing. Spoiler alert! If you do not want to get spoiled about this movie, then click off the video now or skip to here. I guess before we fully get into the film itself, let's talk about the Warner Brothers logo, since that's what this show is covering these movies for. Now this version of the Warner Brothers logo is called Building, since the logo itself features a shield with the letters W and B and a picture of a building inside of it. The W and B standing for Warner Brothers, of course, with the logo itself being against a background of trees. Sure, it's pretty simple and weird, but I actually like the look of it. It's definitely interesting for being Warner Brothers' first film logo, but it's not bad. Also, when they started out, Warner Brothers referred to their movies as classics of the screen, which they used until 1926. But it seems that calling them classics of the screen has actually aged very well, and I honestly find it to be charming. And now, past the Warner Brothers logo, we finally get to the film itself. Clash of the Wolves. Yeah, I'm not going to waste any time here and just tell you that this is an amazing movie. Even judging this movie by today's feature film standards, Clash of the Wolves is fantastic. It's already an amazing way to start off this show. And it honestly sets a very high standard for the other silent films throughout this show. Now obviously silent films like these are very different to the feature films we see today. Since the characters obviously don't have any sound to talk, a lot of what they say and a lot of the important context is explained through title cards. Now stuff like this is why you got to keep in mind the time period this movie was made in. And the same thing is the case, of course, for every other silent film as well. And obviously, I'm someone who always keeps this in mind. But even still, this is a very engaging and well-made movie, especially for 1925. The movie itself is about a half-breed wolf named Lobo, played by Rin Tin Tin, who after he and his pack escape a fire in the mountains, they're driven into a nearby desert. Which is when a man named Dave Weston, along with his girlfriend Mae Barstow and her assistant Bill, come across Lobo and his pack. And when they warn the ranch about wolves being nearby, the ranchers go after the wolves. But when he draws the fire on himself in order to save his pack, Lobo runs off a cliff and gets his foot pierced by a cactus. And after bandaging up Lobo's wound, Dave manages to tame the half-breed wolf, as Lobo forsakes the wild to become Dave's dog. But since the people of the ranch still want to kill Lobo, Dave, Mae, and Bill have to disguise him when going around the ranch. But earlier, a claim jumper posing as a chemist named W.M. Horton got involved with Dave's claim on some borax he found. So Dave goes out with Lobo during a sandstorm to put out his claim. But since Horton was following them close by, he confronts Dave and shoots him, leaving him for dead. But Lobo manages to save his owner by dragging him into some cover during the storm, which is when Dave tells Lobo to run back to the ranch to get help. So now it's up to Lobo to help his owner and stop Horton. Yeah, as you can tell, even though I tried to describe the plot, there's a lot going on. And I really struggled to explain the main plot of this movie. It's one of those movies where, although it's difficult to fully describe the plot, when actually watching the movie itself, it's very engaging. I was fully invested all throughout this movie's 68-minute running time. The story is consistently engaging the entire way through. And moments like the action scenes, or moments where our characters have to face or get out of a massive threat, are very gripping. Simply because we care about the characters. We get just enough time throughout the movie to get to know the characters enough to root for them. I mean, this is a 68-minute movie, so it doesn't have a lot of time to fully flesh out its characters. But the movie does succeed in making the audience care for them. And we get a lot of calmer moments of our characters interacting whenever they're not trying to get out of danger. And those are the moments that really help the audience care about the characters a lot more. Because the time that we do have to know the characters is used very well, giving the movie a very good pace throughout its entire 68-minute running time. The performances in the movie are also very good. They know just the right movements to convey throughout the entire movie. I mean, I do have to bring up the obvious, of course. The animals in this movie can cause some unintentionally funny moments. I mean, take this scene for example, where Lobo and his pack are chasing a cow and have to corner it to make sure it doesn't get away. Like, be honest, you guys. You saw what just happened there, didn't you? The cow was literally trying to bash the dogs. Like, legitimately. If people saw this scene out of context, I think they would legitimately laugh out loud at it. just for how ridiculous it is. Even though the animals do well for what's required of the scenes, they're obviously still just animals being animals. So I don't really think we should fully blame the movie for this stuff, since this is just what you get when you rely on real live animals to carry movie scenes. However, if there was possibly one exception to this, it has to be Rin Tin Tin himself as Lobo. Now again, like the other animals in the movie, he's pretty much just an animal being an animal. But in comparison to every other animal in this movie, Rin Tin Tin is probably the closest to an actual actor. Although I feel like we should probably use that more as a point towards the directing, since it was probably just the directors guiding Rin Tin Tin really well. But regardless, out of all the animals in the movie, Rin Tin Tin is definitely the one that stays the most in character throughout. Rin Tin Tin in this movie doesn't feel like an animal who was just put on the set of a movie and just fools around. He actually does a lot of stuff required for his character's scenes in the movie, thus making Lobo himself feel like an actual character and not just a dog who was put on set. In general, it's very hard to find actual animal actors, or rather, animals who do a really good job playing their character in a movie. But Rin Tin Tin is certainly one for sure. But as for the human actors, like I said, they are really good in here. Like I said, they know exactly how to move in each scene. And they all give some very expressive performances, especially Honey Conklin as Bill. Now obviously, Bill is meant to be more of the comic relief in this movie, being a lot more flashy and over the top in his movements. And his character even has a few over-the-top gags, like being scared by a stuffed wolf that's put out towards him, thinking it's a real wolf and jumping into a barrel, or grabbing soap chips instead of shredded coconut and jumping into water to get the taste out. Yes, it's obvious that Bill is supposed to get the majority of the laughs in this movie, with him over-exaggerating a lot of stuff and having massive reactions, but the comedy with his character in this movie is actually quite funny here. And Honey Conklin's exaggerated performance definitely helps. But the other performances in here are amazing as well, like William Walling's commanding performance as Sam Barstow, Pat Hartigan's threatening presence as W.M. Horton, June Marlowe is very good in this as the leading Lady May, and Charles Farrell's performance as Dave Weston hits a variety of notes here, especially during his bigger moments in the movie. His performance particularly gets good after Dave is shot by Horton, where he looks a bit more noticeably weaker, truly helping in terms of showing how much higher the stakes have been raised. Although looking at this scene nowadays, I now personally find it to be a bit ironic, considering that this kind of scene with one of our main characters beaten down and his dog rescuing him and dragging him to shelter would be done very similarly 100 years later in another Warner Brothers owned movie, James Gunn's Superman. Now, obviously this is just a coincidence, and this scene in Superman is not a direct reference to Clash of the Wolves. It's just a cool little coincidence I wanted to bring up. I don't know, I just found the similarities kind of interesting. But back onto Clash of the Wolves, yeah, the performances in this movie are really good. And another thing about this movie is that it also looks really good overall. Now, obviously there are a few lines you see on screen because of the movie's age, but it still looks really good overall. Even putting aside the quality of the restoration of this movie itself, the movie still looks really good overall, especially for a 1920s movie. Even when the characters' movements get a little faster, the movie still doesn't look bad. The locations and sets all look really good overall. And even during the moments where the movie uses props for stunts that the actual animals can't pull off, it doesn't take you out of the movie at all, mainly because you understand why the animals can't pull these stunts off. But yeah, still a really good looking movie overall. Like, again, this movie is 100 years old now, and it still looks good today. I mean, just for a comparison, Warner Brothers releases this abomination almost 100 years later, which not only has literally the dumbest concept for any feature-length film in general, but also features CGI abominations that cause me physical pain to look at. Which is exactly why I am currently censoring the worst of it in the footage you see right now. And I'm only bringing this up right now because when your movie looks a million times worse than a movie that's about a century older, then that's how you know your movie is an awful looking piece of shit that doesn't deserve any attention. And I know I'm going off topic at this point, but I'm sorry. I just had to bring up how awful this abomination looks. This thing literally makes Clash of the Wolves look like the Spider-Verse movies in comparison. I'm sorry for yelling a bit there, but I just had to let it out for a brief moment, and I just have to talk about this thing another time because I have a lot more issues. But anyways, back to talking about a real movie now. But yeah, despite being 100 years old now, Clash of the Wolves, though noticeably has some dated elements to its look, is still a very good looking movie overall despite its age. And that's not even to mention Remastered Cinema's colorized version of the movie. I mean, yeah, like when anyone tries to remaster a black and white film into color, there are a few moments where the color doesn't look as good and the black and white does show a little bit. There are still a few moments where the colorization does actually look good, some of which I will actually bring up in a bit. But even looking outside of all of that stuff, Clash of the Wolves is just very well executed. And again, is just very engaging all the way through. Like again, there wasn't a moment in this movie where I wasn't thoroughly engaged throughout. While there is a good chunk of slower paced, calmer moments throughout the movie, there are a lot more grander, more epic moments that really help make the movie engaging. Especially those that really ramp up the intensity, that really got me invested. But I really got invested in it a lot towards the end. Speaking of which, to get into one element of the movie that I really felt made it work. Again, if you didn't listen to it already, massive spoiler alert. Because now we are finally gonna get into the ending. So again, to avoid any more spoilers, skip to here. But anyways, now we finally come to the end of the movie. Dave, still weak after being shot by Horton, sends Lobo to go find May to get help. But when Lobo arrives back at the ranch, he sees May talking with, oh no! Yeah, Lobo gets distracted from his mission in order to seek revenge on Horton for shooting Dave. But when Lobo tries to get higher on the building to do that, he keeps slipping. Because earlier in the movie, when Dave bandaged up Lobo's wound from the cactus, he put little dog boots on him to keep his feet from getting hurt. But since Lobo keeps slipping when he tries to go up the ramp, he decides to take desperate measures and he takes the boots off his feet. And it's only then when he finally is able to get up the ramp. And once he's up, he keeps his eyes on Horton, and then at the perfect moment... Oh no. Yeah, since the rest of the ranch doesn't know that Horton shot Dave, when Lobo attacked him, they got scared. To the point that some of them even shoot at Lobo. Thankfully though, Lobo does manage to get away before he could get shot. But that still doesn't change that some people in the ranch now seek to kill him though. Oh man, how is he gonna get out of this one? Thankfully though, May does quickly spot Dave's water pouch on the ground, which she then shows the message that Dave wrote on it to her father and Horton. And that night, Lobo runs over to the Barstow house, looking at them through the window. Lobo even uses his paw to wave hi to them. Oh, that's nice. But then when he's spotted by May, he then quickly runs off. But then quickly jumps back when May looks out the window. But then when Lobo starts barking, it quickly catches the attention of May's father, Sam, who then quickly grabs a shotgun. Uh-oh. But then Lobo quickly gets away when Sam starts to shoot at him. Which is when May finally comes to the logical conclusion and tells her father that something must have happened to Dave. But then when one of Horton's partners spots Lobo and attempts to shoot him, Horton tells him not to, revealing that he's already filed Dave's claim in his name, oh no! And vowing that Dave must not turn up alive. Horton decides to follow Lobo's tracks to make sure Dave is dead. When both Lobo and Horton arrive back to the area around Dave's location, Dave calls out for Lobo as Horton hears him and also finds the place where he was hiding. And when Horton starts shooting at Dave, Lobo hears the gunshots and storms back to his owner. Which is when the fight between Dave and Horton then gets physical. Which is when Lobo finally arrives back and runs in to attack Horton. But then Horton manages to get a grip on Lobo and tosses him to the side, which gives Horton the opportunity to try and get away, but then Lobo immediately gets back up to chase after him. And then Lobo has to run away from Sam Barstow and many other people from the ranch trying to kill him. And then when it looks like Lobo is cornered, he does a massive run up and then does this massive jump across the cliffs. Oh my god, have I mentioned yet how good this movie is? There are a ton of scenes throughout with a massive scale, and even for 1925, they're still incredibly well done and very intense. Like again, this movie is now 100 years old. And it's still amazingly well made and thoroughly engaging, even today. Like seriously, I cannot stress enough how good this movie is. There is just so much scale and ambition. It's just amazing to watch. There are just so many moments in this movie that I'm amazed they were able to pull off this well, especially for 1925. This movie's just so well made. The action, the ambition, the massive scale moments. And this scene of Lobo jumping between the cliffs is an amazing example of that. Like, obviously this kind of scene could be pulled off much easier today, especially with the enhancement of modern day visual effects. But knowing that they actually had to have Rin Tin Tin himself jump between those two cliffs is what really amazes me. Like, there's many things in this movie I was amazed they were able to pull off back in 1925. But anyways, back on track. It turns out that May has also come to the same location. But off screen, it looks like Dave also got out of the cave he was hiding in. And so Dave and May finally get to reunite with each other, with May being relieved that Dave is actually okay. But, we still gotta remember that Horton still has to be dealt with. And not only does Horton push Dave back down, but just to beat the man while he's down, he storms off with May. Thankfully though, Lobo has still been keeping a close eye on what's happening. And after he sees Lobo taking May, he howls out to his pack for help. And after running off to his call, Lobo and his pack run after Horton. May is thankfully able to escape during the chase, with Lobo quickly coming in to see if she's alright. But Lobo and his pack still have to deal with Horton. And still seeking revenge on Horton for almost killing his owner, Lobo runs back to his pack to continue the chase, with Lobo quickly going back to being insanely hot on Horton's tail. They get insanely close to defeating him, but after a very long and intense chase, well, I think it's best described by using audio from another movie.
No, let me explain. No, you don't understand. No, I didn't mean... No, no!
Yeah, I did that for a reason, because, come on, it's undeniable. Those wolves just ate Horton. I mean, come on, Lobo and his wolf pack are ruthless enough to do that. I mean, not only does Lobo already have a vendetta against Horton for shooting his owner, but we also saw earlier in the movie that whenever a wolf gets injured, the law of the pack is death to the wounded wolf. I mean, yeah, that last part is completely messed up, even though that is what animals would do in real life, but still, it proves my point. I mean, with both this and Lobo already having that vendetta against Horton, then I think it's pretty damn easy to see why the pack would go ahead and munch on him. This is the kind of situation where the stars and the planets just align way too perfectly. So yeah, I think it's pretty undeniable that Horton is now in the bellies of Lobo's pack. And with Horton finally getting his well-deserved comeuppance, Lobo finally walks up onto a rock and howls in victory. And the title card following it ends the movie with a beautiful message. Wolf heart and human heart are ever the same when love rules. It's this particular card that really sold me on how beautiful this movie truly is. Because throughout this movie, we got to know these characters. We've gotten to see what they've been through, we've gotten to see how they've developed, and despite being a very simple story in the grand scheme of things, it's ultimately a very beautiful story about the true power of love. Because we get to see a wolf pack leader like Lobo bond with humanity. We got to see his bond with a human like Dave, and become so attached to him to the point that when someone like Horton tries to hurt him, he not only gets his pack to kill Horton, but he's also willing to save not just Dave, but also the people that are close to him. Abandoning the wild and becoming a pet to become a part of civilization. And it all comes together in an amazing way with the movie closing out on a happy note for our heroes. At the very end of the movie, we get to see Dave and May together on a boat in the river. And not only does Lobo join them, but also his mate and their puppies. Oh, that's cute. But more importantly, it shows how Lobo's family has fully abandoned the wild and become a part of Dave and May's family, bringing everything throughout the movie together in an amazing, beautiful way. Also, before the end of this review, I will quickly say this. In Remastered Cinema's colored remaster of this movie, like the rest of the film, there are some times in the ending where the colorization can look dodgy, but everything that you're seeing on screen right now actually looks really good. And in some cases, even adds a bit to the scale of some scenes. And even when the coloring doesn't work as well, the movie itself is still so engaging that it doesn't really take you out of the movie entirely. And it still keeps the audience thoroughly invested throughout. And again, for a movie that's now 100 years old, it's amazing how engaging it is even today. And some of the shots in this color remaster do help some scenes. Anyways, back to the end of the movie so that I can wrap this review up. Where the last shot of the movie is Lobo's puppies in a bucket at the end of the boat. As the screen fades to black, marking the end of this Warner Brothers classic of the screen. So now with all of that said and done, you might be wondering one more thing. Why the hell did I just ramble on about this movie for around 30 minutes? I mean, this review is almost half as long as the movie itself. Like, I just made a half-hour-long review overanalyzing a 1-hour-long silent film from 1925. And you may think I overanalyzed a lot of this movie, and you'd be right. But listen, I've literally been running this YouTube channel since April 2022, and only now am I taking myself more seriously as a film reviewer. And I am also a passionate wannabe filmmaker who loves way more movies than most people. And I'm also just really passionate about movies in general. So I just really hope you can excuse me for overanalyzing this movie a lot. It's probably gonna happen way more on my channel. So I hope you can excuse the overanalyzing here. But anyways, with all that overanalyzing out of the way, what are my overall thoughts on Clash of the Wolves? Honestly, I'd say that not only is Classic of the Screen a good way to describe this movie, but I'd even go out of my way and say that it's a masterpiece. This movie is just so well done and thoroughly engaging all the way through. 100 years later, it still holds up amazingly well. The movie looks good all the way through and has a really cinematic feel to it. And even in the scenes where they use props, it's understandable why they do, and it doesn't take you out of the movie. The performances all around are also really good. Not just from the human actors, but also Rin Tin Tin as Lobo. I never really felt like he was just a dog who was just messing around doing his own thing on set. He actually felt in character here. And if he's also good in his other movies, then I can't wait to review them later on this season. Another great thing about this movie is also the massive scale. For a movie from 1925, this movie has some real ambition in its bigger moments. And that ambition definitely helps to make some scenes grander and more intense. The characters are also very good in here. The leads here are especially likable. especially Lobo. His arc in this movie, where he goes from a smart pack leader to a loyal, civilized pet, along with his bond with Dave, is what really makes this movie beautiful. Since this movie is only an hour long, it's a very simple story. But it's amazingly well told. And part of that is the character arc of Lobo, an arc that adds to this movie's beautiful story of the true power of love. Because not only is Dave's romance with May prominent here, but so is Lobo's loving bond with him too. We humans in our hearts feel love. And dogs also have that kind of love in their heart too. Not just pet dogs' love for their owners, but also dogs in general feeling it for the ones of their kind that they love. Even when Lobo became Dave's dog, that couldn't stop him from going back with his mate, because of the love that they have for each other in their hearts. And when Dave showed Lobo love by healing his injury and being nice to him to the point of giving him some water, he ended up growing a bond with Dave, to the point that not even reuniting with his mate was able to stop him from going back to Dave when he was in peril. Because of the bond he ended up growing with Dave. And that bond with Dave really made Lobo into a loyal pet, even going as far as to extend that bond to May. All of this to show that wolf heart and human heart are ever the same when love rules, which is truly what makes the movie as beautiful as it is. Despite this movie only being an hour long, by that last scene, you really do feel the movie's truly beautiful impact. Clash of the Wolves isn't just amazing by silent film standards, it's just an amazing movie in general. This movie is probably now in my top 20 favorite movies of all time. I overanalyzed it this much because I truly love it. It's a movie that's still amazing today as much as it was back in 1925. I think I've pretty much said all I can about this movie at this point. I truly just love it so much. If you're interested in early cinema, or are as much of a film buff as I am, then this is a film that I highly recommend you check out. It is 100% a must-watch. Also, it's short and quick to watch, considering it's only an hour long, and you can also find it for free on YouTube since, again, it's in the public domain. So you literally have zero reason not to watch this movie. Don't get me wrong, I still love the 1911 Pinocchio movie too, and I'll probably talk about that movie as well sometime, since I have a lot to say about it as well. But that film in comparison feels more like an appetizer, while Clash of the Wolves was the movie that really has made me want to watch more silent films, which I will get to cover more throughout this season. And here's hoping that they'll be even an ounce as good as this magnificent, masterful, all-time classic of the screen. I am just so happy that the Library of Congress has preserved this film in the National Film Registry, because it's one that absolutely deserves it. Now, just a heads up before I give my rating on this movie, it's probably gonna seem like I hand out this rating all over the place over the course of this series, but it's mainly because I'm a massive movie buff, so I love a lot of movies. So yeah, you'll see me give this rating out a lot more than many people usually do. But anyways, I give Clash of the Wolves a 10 out of 10. It is just an absolute masterpiece of cinema. I'm just very happy that this movie has survived now a century after its release, and here's hoping that it will continue to live on for years to come. Phew! Well, that review was much longer than expected. Thanks for making it all the way to the end, by the way, guys. If you stuck around to watch this review for this long, then I definitely appreciate it. I mean, it was a bit of a long review, sure, but the intro was a bit long because I had to explain the rules and introduce the series. Plus, I just had a lot to say about Clash of the Wolves. But I'll try my best to make these reviews shorter as this show goes on. But I'm definitely happy that I started my journey through all these movies for this show on a high note with this first episode, with reviewing Clash of the Wolves. And after this, I certainly can't wait to get to Rin Tin Tin's other movies this season. But for now, in the next episode, we're going to be looking at a very interesting case. I'll probably explain this a bit more in the next episode, but Clash of the Wolves is actually one of only 2 Warner Brothers feature-length films from 1925 that has actually survived. And in the next episode of Warner Brothers Workers of the Years, we'll be looking at Warner Brothers' only other surviving feature-length film from 1925, Lady Windermere's Fan. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the Fergus Review channel for more videos like this. Trust me, we haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. Mark my word, viewers, Warner Brothers Logos of the Years has just begun! I think I'll hang out in 1925 for a bit before the next episode. Thanks for joining me! I'll see you next time! Goodbye! Warner Brothers Logos of the Years has been a production from the Fergus Review channel.